most narcissists do not receive a diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder because they do not want to go to counseling to fix themselves. So if you have a person with narcissistic personality disorder attend counseling, let's say in a couples situation, they are not going to be accountable. So when we look at those patterns of narcissism, part of that is no empathy. Part of that is their inability to love. If you've spent time, let's say, running a marathon, at the end of the marathon, you need to stop running so your body can recoup. You need to take the time to refuel, rest your body so that you feel better. It's the same with healing from trauma.
Is the social media helpful or is it not helpful, though, with these people for this type of stuff?
I think it can be confusing because narcissists also are paying attention to social media. So they're utilizing the terms and almost weaponizing them. So in my personal situation, my ex is a narcissist, but he'll often flip that narrative to claim that I am the narcissist. So to keep your own sanity, your own mental health is setting your own boundaries. What is acceptable to me? How do I begin the process of gray rocking or using limited contact with that person and only discussing logistical matters surrounding children, no longer engaging in anything that seems antagonistic or where they're attempting to pull you into a conversation that you don't want to have. Find your support system, whether that is a friend, a family member, a therapist, a peer. There are tons of support groups online. You want to find your people so you don't lose your footing in the process and lose yourself.
Welcome to Season 2 of the Just Separate podcast. I'm Karen Oman, a thanatologist, grief counselor, divorce strategist, and co-author of the Just Separated workbook. I help people navigate the emotional, legal, and practical challenges of divorce, including high conflict and narcissist relationships. Each week, I am joined by expert guests to share guidance, tools, and strategies so you can move forward with clarity, confidence, and resilience. Follow Just Separated and join us as we explore the many layers of divorce. Subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Hi, welcome to the Just Separate podcast. I'm your host, Karen Oman, co-founder of Divorce Workshop. Today we're going to be talking about post-divorce abuse, narcissist survival, and parental alienation. And our expert guest is Dr. Tina Paon. Dr. Tina Paon is a licensed professional counselor, registered play therapist supervisor, a tenured professor with over 25 years in mental health field. She spent her career training future therapists, leading social justice work, and helping survivors of complex trauma reclaim their lives. Dr. Paon's work is rooted in compassion, clarity, and truth, and she is a sought-after speaker, therapist, and advocate, dedicating to raising awareness about abuse and helping others find their voice. Dr. Paon, welcome to the Just Separate podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here today.
So I've been here, and so have many of the listeners. There's that terrifying reality that nobody warns you about. When you leave that antagonistic, narcissist personality, the abuse doesn't stop. It escalates. They will weaponize your children, they will try to ruin you financially, and they will use the court systems if they can. So for those listeners who are realizing right now that their ex could be escalating just because you left the marriage, how do they survive this shift without losing their sanity?
Great question. So it's very common for survivors to feel like they're losing themselves in the process. It is really being able to determine what is necessary in communication after a separation or divorce, especially when we are talking about children, continued conversation, whereas the antagonistic or narcissistic individual may start utilizing some of those techniques that seem like they are escalating. So to keep your own sanity, your own mental health is setting your own boundaries. What is acceptable to me? How do I begin the process of gray rocking or using limited contact with that person and only discussing logistical matters surrounding children, no longer engaging in anything that seems antagonistic or where they're attempting to pull you into a conversation that you don't want to have.
Do you know what really came up for me a lot is I had to justify everything. So I would get a nasty email or something, and I would sit for hours thinking, okay, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to tell you, I did it. I said at the beginning, I didn't know I was divorcing an antagonistic personality. I had an inkling, but I didn't know back then. And so I would write and go, okay, justify this, justify that, try to keep maybe rationalizing with him. Or so is that common as well, that we try to keep teaching or justifying them?
Absolutely, because we know the truth. So what we're trying to do is correct the things that they're saying or justify, why did you do this? Why didn't you do this? And so we look at an email and we sit with it, and we, may even develop some tension when we see that name come into our inbox. We're like, oh no, what is this? And again, similar to your experience, mine was the same, this onslaught of emails that were very disparaging about my ability to be a mother, different aspects of my child's life. Why are these boundaries being set? Why are these rules appropriate? I don't think these should be done in your home. But we're not in the same home anymore, so I get to make those choices. And again, it is very often that in the beginning of this separation, we're still trying to keep the peace. We're trying to make it as digestible as possible for the sake of our children. And in doing that, we're falling into this trap that the narcissist or antagonistic person has set for us. They want us to justify. They want us to get sucked into these emails that they're sending. They want us to explain ourselves and follow along with whatever it is that they're doing. For them, it's really easy. They send off the email from all different directions, truth or not, because they know you'll respond to the lies or the untruths. And what they're looking for is engagement. So as long as you continue to engage and continue to answer these long-winded emails or these disparaging emails, they're going to engage right back. And that's part of their techniques is, can I hoover this individual back into my life somehow? And we see that so often.
Yeah, is that what we would classify as coercive control? They have a hard time letting go of any control, and that's why they escalate after you leave?
Absolutely. When they want to leave, or when you want to leave, they don't want you to leave, because remember, you're part of their supply, their narcissistic supply. They don't want you leaving. And so they find other ways to connect with you. And usually it is your children. They are an extension of you. So if they can't control you, they'll begin to control the way your children think about you.
So let's talk briefly about that, because I have also heard that most, like, financials are huge, but a lot of them also use, as you said, the children. And for those really antagonistic divorces, they try to use their kids like, what do you call it? Like a remote control on a TV or whatever metaphor you want to use. So is that one of the strongest ways they use is manipulating their children to control through them to you?
Yes. As soon as you, as the adult, start setting boundaries with the narcissist or antagonistic person, they realize they're not going to reach you in the same ways they could when you were in the relationship. So your children will travel back and forth. So they become almost the mouthpiece for that parent, creating what you already introduced as parental alienation. How do I drive a wedge between the targeted parent and the child? And that is what their new intent is. Again, they are very much about revenge, and they're going to try to get it in any way possible. And I know you mentioned some other things as well, financial, court systems, through the children. There are so many ways that person cannot let it go. It is not a simple separation or divorce. It is always toxic. It's always ongoing, and it continues for years and years and years, even as the child moves into adulthood.
Can we just talk about, so adulthood, when children, I want people to understand, is just because a child reaches adulthood, does that automatically mean they understand all the dynamics of it?
I will say absolutely not. As adults, we're still trying to figure out the dynamics of it. So when we think about, okay, I recognize this, now I have to learn about this concept, I have to figure out what I need to do for myself, how do I help my children? So I'm doing that as an adult. How do I expect my 18-year-old or my 25-year-old to actually have all the concepts that took me years to gain as well? So I do believe that media is more present in our children's lives now. So they have access to information that maybe we didn't as children. And again, I'm putting you in the same age bracket as myself. Because when we were growing up, there was no internet, there was no TikTok, there was no way to glean information about narcissism or toxic parents or emotional control. Children now have that access much easier, and it will come up on their feeds. They do have more language than we would equivalently had at their age. But they still don't understand the concepts 100%. They just have a better understanding.
Yeah, I was thinking, in my own personal life, my father coercively controlled or alienated my older sister for about 10 years from my mother, from the age of 10 to 20. And she, of course, didn't have any, like that, our age group, we didn't have anything like that. It was newspaper where you went to the library and microfished, right? Like there was no such thing as what we have now. Is the social media helpful or is it not helpful though with these people for this type of stuff?
I think it can be confusing because narcissists also are paying attention to social media. So they're utilizing the terms and almost weaponizing them. So in my personal situation, my ex is a narcissist, but he'll often flip that narrative to claim that I am the narcissist. And so terminology gets thrown up. I've heard, my children use the word gaslighting. You're gaslighting me, mom. And, you're projecting onto me. And although they generally understand the terms, it's been used through a narrative or through a lens that is not accurate. And so I do believe that if you're not looking deep into those definitions and understanding how they play out in the dynamic, it is sometimes too much information and being used improperly, especially by narcissistic or antagonistic individuals.
The heartbreaking thing about this situation is if I look at, your situation or my mother's, good enough parent, right? Like it was my mother had food on the table, clothes were clean, loving and nurturing, and it still was turned on her. So there's a lot of huge grief component with these, and I know it's becoming. I hear about it all the time. These parents that are, all of a sudden the kids don't talk to them anymore. So there's a lot of pain in this situation.
Yes, I agree 100%. It is very devastating when your living child is not speaking with you, or your living child believes that you are a monster or something that they should be afraid of. And they will side with the parent who is doing the targeting, who's doing the alienating, so that the narrative holds true. And it doesn't hold true, but they utilize the knowledge that they have of you as an individual. So, for example, mom's going to set that rule, and I know you don't want that rule. So when she sets it, you don't have to follow that, or that type of manipulation. So the child believes that, oh, well, the other parent has my best interests in mind. Mom's setting these boundaries that are just ridiculous. Like, do your chores.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, think about that as young teenagers, like those, one gets you to stay up, you can stay up to whatever you want. In the other house, it's like, no, you're going to bed at 10, or you can't go out all night. And the other, so I can see how, we were all teenagers once, how that's like, well, it's easier at that house, so I'll just hang out there. Right?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And of course, what teenager doesn't want a free-for-all? Staying out to whenever, using the cell phone all night, being able to not have rules or boundaries and do as they will, almost as though they are miniature adults at that point in time. Every teenager wants that opportunity. So when you're with a parent who is setting boundaries, setting rules, curfews, online time, that is deemed as absolutely not acceptable to that child. So it reinforces the narcissist or the coercive controlling adult in their life to say, oh, well, this one has it right. I don't need to follow those rules. It is much better for me when I can, use my cell phone all night and text my friends and figure out how to wake up for school the next morning.
Is there any tips you can give the listeners about what to watch out for, right? Like if you know that I said to you at the beginning of the podcast, I had an inkling that something was wrong. I actually dropped on the kitchen table Dr. George Simmons. I don't know if you know him. He's a psychologist, I think he's a psychologist, and he has Character Disturbance. It's one of the first books I ever read years ago about these personalities, and he laughed at me, right? So I had an inkling, but I didn't know. But if they have an inkling and they know, because there's so much more knowledge out there, is there any tips you can give them? Go, okay, I better watch out for this, or like, especially when it comes to the children?
I think that your perspective is very similar to mine. I had an inkling, but I wasn't certain what it was or what the proper language was to identify his behaviors. At first, my understanding was, oh, after the divorce, he became a narcissist. And then learning more and more about that, I realized that that doesn't work that way. You can't become one after a divorce. You have always been one. So for me, it was going backwards and recognizing, oh, these patterns always existed. They existed from the day I met this person. I just didn't recognize them. So by the time I did, my child was already in that deep control area. So I would love to say, yes, look for these signs. If you are already sensing that the person you're with, the person you're planning on leaving, has these tendencies, it's important to be very mindful of, how do I continue to provide my child with the love and caring and understanding they need? It doesn't mean they will be safe from that parent who is attempting to alienate you, but it does mean that you can continue to provide that consistent space for your children to land. It is always loving here. I will always love you here. This will be something that we work on throughout our lives.
I've heard also that the children, that the parents, sorry, it has to be almost like perfect, because if they do anything a little bit wrong and they tell the other parent will use it against them. Am I wrong to think that way?
I don't think you're wrong. I think it's anything that the other parent does, whether it's perfect or not, it will not matter, because the narrative will change. It will flip to something that the alienating parent is trying to do to target the other or the opposite parent. And so it doesn't matter if you're perfect. They will find a way to then manipulate that perfection.
So in your clinical experience and knowledge, do children come back? That's a big question.
It is a big
and
question.
I'm sorry. I'm just trying to, if anyone's listening and they're going through what my mom went through, or you're going through, like, is there any stats? Is there any acknowledgement that some of them come back? Or
I am aware that some children develop their own sense of something's not right. They feel it too. So it really is about how open-minded are the children, their own personalities into learning and consuming new information. That may come in late teenage years for some children. Some children it will take into their 20s or their 30s or even their 40s before they realize, oh, things are not the way that they were presented to me. So it does depend on how deep in your children are and what ages they are at this time of separation. So for a personal example, I have 3 children, and my 2 older boys were older at the time of my divorce. So they didn't buy it right away. They sensed something was wrong, but they were in their late teens at that point. So they knew what they had experienced as children in that environment and realized, no, that's not consistent with who mom is. Whereas my youngest child, he was 8 at the time of our separation, was completely enamored with dad's version of how the world works. So it does really depend on age, open-mindedness, their own philosophies about learning, and can I do what I need to do to repair those relationships. So as mom, I can say my door is open. We can have conversations. We can talk about these things when you're ready. I am always going to be a person that is here for you. I am not abandoning you. I am here when you are ready. And so the more children hear that what you do is consistent and it is always the same in regards to love and openness, the hope is that they will eventually come back and reconnect in the way that you're looking for.
I have a question. Depending on where they are in the spectrum of narcissism, right? Because not all are diagnosed, narcissist personality disorder, but are they capable of actually loving their children?
So most narcissists do not receive a diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder because they do not want to go to counseling to fix themselves. So if you have a person with narcissistic personality disorder attend counseling, let's say in a couples situation, they are not going to be accountable. So when we look at those patterns of narcissism, part of that is no empathy. Part of that is their inability to love. So when we try to kind of flip that and say, oh, well, they love the child because I see them do these things. Is it love, or is it, this is the breadcrumb that I'm giving my child? So maybe I buy you a sweatshirt. So it looks like love. You were a good kid. I bought you a sweatshirt, or I got you your favorite, meal today. We went out. I did these things that feel to the general public as loving and anything that a loving parent might do. But there's always strings attached. So I'll love you if not only do I buy you this item, but then you support me when I say mom is crazy. And you really kind of reinforce that narrative with me as we discuss your mom or your stepdad or other people in your life that I have deemed monsters. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Does that clarify?
It also clarifies that money also can win, right? If you're thinking about, we talked about teenagers, young tweens to teenagers, that, oh, well, I'm going to take you to France. What can your mother do, right? Or I'm going to buy you a car. Look how good I am, right? And then they feed off of that, right?
Of course. Any children or any child is always looking for that. What can I get? That is how children think. They're egocentric. They live in that space until they've matured. Is I want, I need. And so if one parent is supplying those things, especially the extras, the things they don't need but just want, so the car, the cell phone, the iPad, the computer, all of the things that they're looking for, video game systems, that's a huge one in that we hear coming into the clinical world is, well, they bought them the Xbox. They're allowing the children to play these games that are inappropriate age-wise because they want to. And so that can create even more of a disparity between parents. And it doesn't always work with the parent that has more money. So sometimes the alienator or the narcissistic individual is the one with the finances, and sometimes it's the opposite parent. So the child is then convinced that your other parent is not getting that to you because they don't love you. I would get it if I had the money, but I don't have the money. So you can ask your mom. And if your mom doesn't give it to you, it's because she doesn't care about you. She doesn't love you. And so it works both ways, whether the narcissist has the money or whether they don't have the money, they figure out how to manipulate financially.
Yeah, I had one story was, well, they abandoned you. They don't love you like I love you, right? And so that they start programming that. And then meanwhile, it wasn't that, is the family was rearranging because the male didn't love the wife anymore, like the dad didn't love him. It wasn't about the children, but she made it all about, well, your dad abandoned you and used that type of manipulation. So they're pretty good at what they do.
Yes, and that's a common one. Your other parent abandoned you. I see that coming through clinical practice often. And it is the child doesn't have all the facts, right? So it may feel like mom or dad abandoned you because I have set up that environment so you know nothing else. So we hear these stories about, the parent who sends birthday gifts, who sends holiday gifts and cards and reaches out, tries to text, tries to call, but there's no response because the other parent is blocking. So the child believes the narrative of this parent abandoned me, whereas the other parent continues to reach out, but the opposite adult is blocking that relationship.
So just another quick question is, from my childhood, I came from a alcohol addiction home. So I was already programmed, right? Like nervous system. So is that common that people like me would be attracted, or would just because we would just attract more of that personality? My dad was narcissistic, antagonistic. For some reason, I said in my, when I was picking out my future partner, okay, well, he can't drink much. That was my only value. I didn't look at anything else. Is that also common, or can anyone be susceptible?
Of course, anybody can be susceptible, but you are more likely susceptible if you've experienced that environment growing up. And what I mean by that is it's not that you attracted the narcissist, it's the narcissist felt familiar. And in that familiarity, it felt comfortable because it is all you knew growing up, is that this is how people behave. Now, of course, you knew of the bad behaviors. Like, I don't want somebody who drinks. Okay, so this person doesn't drink, but every other characteristic starts falling into line as you stay longer and longer with that person. You realize how much they likely align with your original person in your life. So whether it's a parent, a grandparent, a sibling, anything of the sort, you're going to see that that's why you felt comfortable. A narcissist will also recognize you, though, for having that need to indulge in the relationship. Somebody who shows up a lot in the beginning. We talk a lot about this when we talk about relationships, is that love bombing. What does that feel like? Well, you feel seen, you feel heard, you feel like somebody is looking at me and taking care of me. And it's very short lived. And in that process, they try to connect and make a connection that's going to last. So you may see an engagement come up quickly, a marriage come up quickly, babies come up quickly, because that is how the narcissist locks in their role into your life for long term.
And you think about your childhood, and they're filling in all those voids you may have not had, right? Like seen and heard, right? Or feeling this fake sense of safety or stability. And that was my case. I'm like, oh, they seem so stable, right? Because I came from such instability, right? Only as you said, if I look back and, it's one of those things, once you see it, once you finally see it, you can never unsee it. And you look back and you go, oh boy, like, did I ever miss all those things? But that's pretty common.
It is, and it's something that we as survivors should not beat ourselves up about, right? We don't know what we don't know. Hindsight is 2020. We can look back now and say, oh wow, from the day I met this person, I can see where little patterns started, and they were always present. I just didn't see them because I was so engaged in the love bombing, in the process of developing a future. And I think that is extremely common. So again, not beating up yourself. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. So I want to talk about your new book, Unbroken, and why you wrote it.
Great. Thank you. My book is called Unbroken: Healing from Narcissistic Abuse and Reclaiming Me. So it is a narrative of my childhood, early childhood grooming, into my second marriage with my narcissistic ex. It does take a dual lens. So I do provide a narrative, but after every chapter, I also provide of what I know now. How does this really apply to the terminology we're talking about? How does it play out in real time? So that is no longer about me, but that's about everyone in general who may be experiencing similarities. And then I move into a space at the end of every chapter of how I took that information and began my own healing journey. Things that went well, things that didn't go well at all, things that I tried that seemed at the time like they'd be great, and then things that didn't work for me. I needed to try something new. And all of the steps forward and the steps backwards as I continued that healing journey.
Is there, okay, wait, I'm blanking out. 27. It's my turn this time. I'm like, I had something and I blanked out. 28. How long did it take you to write the book?
So I have been writing this book in some sense since I was about 12 years old. I wanted to write about my childhood when I was younger because, as we already talked about, when we were younger, the only thing available was the library and independent bookstores or chain bookstores that we could go to. But I couldn't find what I needed. I couldn't find what my situation looked like in any reflection. So I knew way back then that something needed to be written. Of course, life got in the way. I went to college. Lots of things happened. So it sat on the sidelines until probably, I want to say, in the last 10 years, I started realizing, okay, I need to take a shift and I need to start thinking more about writing this book for real. So I still didn't do that for another several years. And probably the last year and a half was where I spent majority of my time writing and editing this book that I created. And I will say it was quite a journey just writing this book. So for me, I decided to rehash every single thing in my life and then realized all of this cannot go in a book because it will be 1,000 pages long. So I had to continually edit my own story down, which felt like I was cutting some pieces out. It also felt very healing in the process that I am writing down the details. I am writing down all of these different pieces from both my childhood into my teenage years and then into this narcissistic marriage and how that all played out. So in the end, I would say a lot of years it took me to get to this point of publishing.
Can we just touch down a little bit about trauma? Because we didn't touch on it, and I think that's important that we talk a little bit about when I finally left. It took 5 times. I was utterly exhausted, and I hear that a lot, and it's because that fear and flight response, right? But if you want to just talk about how that affects us as well.
So when we experience trauma, obviously we have things going on in our nervous system. Our nervous system has been on high alert for years and years and years. And so when you're finally given a safe space and you can let that nervous system relax a little bit, we're not sure what to do with that as survivors. And so as we get into more environments or more spaces where we feel safe, we also become very tired or exhausted because we're really not sure why. We're not doing anything necessarily physically, but our bodies are reacting. They need that rest. If you've spent time, let's say, running a marathon, at the end of the marathon, you need to stop running so your body can recoup. You need to take the time to refuel, rest your body so that you feel better. It's the same with healing from trauma. So if you were in a traumatic situation, if you were in a narcissistic relationship or a childhood, think about how many years that is that you need to rest and relax in order to recuperate yourself. And so we don't want to be thinking that's going to happen really fast. So just like with other topics, the outside world will say, well, aren't you over this yet? Are you not past this yet? Why are you stuck in the past? Your nervous system was very likely on high alert for decades. And so how do you then say, oh, well, you should be done in a year. You should be healed. You should not be talking about this topic. So trauma really does affect our bodies. We all have heard about the body keeps score. That is very true. And you see those things come out in physical forms like exhaustion, or maybe you notice things hurt that didn't hurt before because you didn't give them time to hurt. They were always hurting. You just didn't notice because you were in survival mode. And so really taking the time to care for yourself, visiting a trauma therapist, of course, and talking with a therapist about these things, because it's going to be really important in your own healing. And it is a slow and tedious process, again, because you've probably spent decades in that hyper alert situation.
Yeah, when I had no idea. This is 8 years ago. I mean, I kind of had an idea, but I had no idea. Like again, right? I knew my body was saying something, but I didn't really connect it fully. That Karen, I think you have complex post-traumatic stress disorder because, well, that's not even in the DSM, right?
It is not, and it should be, and that is another thing that folks have been working on. But when we look at CPTSD, or complex post-traumatic stress disorder, it is that constant trauma that's happening over and over and over. And so think about healing from something that you didn't just experience once, you experienced hundreds and hundreds, thousands maybe of times. So your body needs to heal from thousands of wounds.
Yeah, good point. Is there anything we missed today before I ask the last question? We talked about lots of things.
Yeah, I think we've gotten through a lot of material.
Great. So I ask everybody this last question. So for someone who is just separated, whether they left or were left, what advice would you give them to help them navigate those overwhelming early days?
Find your support system, whether that is a friend, a family member, a therapist, a peer. There are tons of support groups online. You want to find your people so you don't lose your footing in the process and lose yourself. I think it's really important to stop and take care of you before you engage again with that individual who is trying to pull you in or push you away in some manner. And I think that it's really important that we look at ourselves. What do I need in this moment? It is definitely not connection with that narcissistic individual, but connection with the people that can support you. And remember, those people that love you, they are still there. You may have lost touch with them, but I will tell you, if you reach out to someone that you know you had a connection to in the past and say, I need you, they're going to show up.
Good point. Good point. So whereabouts can they get in touch with you, and where can they buy your new book, Unbroken?
So Unbroken is available anywhere that you get your books. I have created some accessible versions. So if you're not a reader, I do have an audiobook out there that you can get on any platform that you stream your audiobooks. I do have a large print version if you're struggling with your vision, as Gen Xers are doing nowadays. So I created that as well. And then getting in touch with me, my website is drtinapaon.com. And if you are a resident of the states of New Jersey or Pennsylvania, my private practice is Rise and Thrive Counseling, located in Pennsylvania.
Do you do online as well for them?
We are completely a virtual practice. And
Okay,
so it is not just myself, but I have a team of therapists all trained in narcissistic abuse awareness, trauma recovery, parental alienation, and all of the things that go with those dynamics.
That's great. Great resource as well for everybody. Well, Dr. Paon, it was an honor for you to be on the podcast today. And I'm sitting here going, it's unfortunate that you're so needed, but it's fortunate we have you to help. And I recommend everyone check out the new book because it could be very helpful. I had nothing, right? I didn't know. And I think resources like what you're offering and podcasts, whatever, I think can be really helpful in our journey. So thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining today's conversation with our divorce expert. Check out the show notes for more about our guests, and don't forget to follow us on Spotify and our YouTube channel, divorceworkshop.ca. We'd love to hear from you. Share your questions, comments, or guest suggestions. And for a complete guide to navigating separation and divorce, check out the Just Separated workbook on Amazon. It covers emotions, co-parenting, finances, legal insights, and recovery. A must-have for anyone going through separation or divorce.